A woman in medieval Europe danced for 6 straight days, then 30 people joined her, then hundreds more. Some danced until blood soaked through their shoes, some collapsed from exhaustion, woke up hours later and immediately started dancing again. Others reportedly died in the streets while musicians played beside them. And somehow the government looked at this nightmare situation and decided, you know what this needs? More drums. That actually happened. This is the dancing plague of 1518, one of the strangest events in human history. And over 500 years later, historians still argue about what the hell actually happened. Now, dancing plague sounds goofy, like medieval TikTok, until you realize people literally danced themselves into heart attacks while priests blamed an angry saint. Then suddenly the whole thing becomes terrifying. The outbreak happened in Strasbourg, part of the Holy Roman Empire, which sounds powerful until you realize the Holy Roman Empire was basically medieval Europe held together by religion, politics, and confusion. Life there was miserable. The years before the outbreak were awful. Crop failures destroyed food supplies. Bread prices exploded. Famine spread everywhere. Disease outbreaks kept returning. Plague, smallpox, leprosy, and syphilis had recently spread through Europe after wars in Italy. Europe basically unlocked bonus diseases nobody asked for. These people survived on bread, weak beer, and stress-induced hallucinations. And religion made everything worse psychologically. Modern people panic when Wi-Fi dies for 20 seconds. These people thought bad weather meant God personally hated them. Hell wasn't symbolic. To them, hell was real. Demons were real. Saints could curse people. And one saint terrified people especially badly, Saint Vitus. According to local belief, Saint Vitus punished sinners with uncontrollable dancing. Yes, that was a real thing people feared. Imagine being so religious your biggest concern is, what if God forces me to aggressively moonwalk until cardiac arrest? Then came July 14th, 1518. A woman named Frau Trophia walked into the street and started dancing. There was no musicians, festival, or celebration. She just started moving. At first, people probably thought she had lost her mind. Because honestly, what else are you supposed to think? You're carrying bread home after a 14-hour workday, and suddenly Margaret from down the road starts spinning in circles like somebody possessed her. But the terrifying part wasn't the dancing. It was the fact she never stopped. Hours passed. Still dancing. Night arrived. Still dancing. Next morning, still going. Historical accounts claim she danced for nearly a week. Witnesses described her as exhausted and distressed. This didn't look fun. It looked horrifying. Her feet swelled up. Blood soaked through her shoes. She collapsed repeatedly from exhaustion, then got back up and continued moving. It's like her legs turned into independent life forms. Then somehow other people started dancing too. That's when the story turns into actual nightmare fuel. Within days, dozens of people joined her. Then hundreds. Some records estimate nearly 400 people became affected. Now medieval historians exaggerated constantly. A guy sneezes once in the 1500s and suddenly the local chronicler writes, "And the heavens trembled before the wrath of God." So historians debate exact numbers. But enough people were affected that city authorities documented the outbreak extensively. This was real enough to terrify Strasbourg, and the symptoms sounded horrifying. Victims reportedly danced for days. Some screamed while moving. Some cried uncontrollably. Others stared blankly. Historical descriptions mention twitching limbs, violent spasms, trembling, and trance-like behavior. Modern neurologists compare parts of it to chorea and dissociative movement disorders. Basically, Strasbourg turned into a medieval server experiencing catastrophic lag, and the physical damage became severe quickly. Remember, these people were already starving, already exhausted, already stressed. Now force the body into non-stop movement for days during summer heat. Muscles tear apart as dehydration hits, then electrolytes collapse. The cardiovascular system strains continuously. Historical accounts mention chest pain, hallucinations, strokes, and fatal heart attacks. Some later reports claimed 15 people died every single day during the peak of the outbreak. Now historians debate those exact numbers. Some believe later writers exaggerated the deaths dramatically. But even skeptical historians agree people probably died. The human body simply cannot sustain that level of exertion for long, especially not under medieval conditions. And now we arrive at the point where medieval medicine somehow makes everything worse. The city authorities consulted doctors, which sounds smart until you remember medieval medicine was basically, yes, perhaps we should remove more blood. Doctors at the time believed the body depended on balancing 4 humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, black bile. Apparently, if those got out of balance, your body just started malfunctioning. Honestly, medieval healthcare sounds like biology invented by raccoons. The physicians diagnosed the dancers with something called hot blood, which sounds less like medicine and more like a vampire romance novel written by a drunk wizard. They believed overheated blood had risen to the brain and triggered uncontrollable movement. And their treatment? More dancing. I wish I was joking. The doctors believed the dancers needed to continue moving until the illness burned itself out naturally. That's like treating a house fire by adding gasoline, because eventually there'll be nothing left to burn. So Strasbourg authorities cleared public markets, built wooden stages, and hired musicians. The government literally responded to a deadly psychological disaster by creating medieval Coachella. Imagine trying to buy bread while somebody nearby convulses violently and Greg absolutely destroys a drum solo beside them. At that point, you either leave the city immediately or accept that God abandoned this place years ago. Historical records mention pipers, drummers, and fiddlers constantly playing while victims danced around them. The city even hired healthy people to physically hold exhausted dancers upright so they could continue moving, which means somewhere in European history, a man got paid to force dehydrated peasants to continue breakdancing toward cardiac arrest. That's not healthcare. That's what happens when your doctors learn medicine from cave paintings. And predictably, things became much worse. Because once authorities publicly validated the dancing, panic spread faster. Crowds gathered, fear spread. People already living under enormous stress became psychologically vulnerable. And this is why most historians today think the dancing plague was probably a case of mass psychogenic illness. Basically, mass hysteria. Now that phrase sounds fake, like people pretending for attention, but mass psychogenic illness is very real. The brain is horrifyingly powerful. Under enough stress, it can literally start damaging the body by itself. Convulsions, pain, paralysis, blindness, fainting. The nervous system can basically short-circuit under extreme psychological pressure, and Strasbourg had every ingredient necessary for collective mental collapse: famine, disease, religious fear, economic instability, social trauma, widespread belief in curses. The entire city's mental health was hanging by a thread. Then one visibly distressed woman starts dancing publicly. Others witness it. Fear spreads, suggestion spreads, and suddenly the entire city begins psychologically feeding the phenomenon. Humans copy each other constantly. Yawning spreads, laughter spreads, panic spreads. Apparently medieval cardio marathons spread too. Honestly, humanity is such a weird species. Give us enough stress and we either start wars, invent cults, or aggressively moonwalk toward organ failure. Now there's another theory that somehow sounds even more ridiculous. Poison bread. Syria, but most experts reject the theory now, mainly because ergot poisoning causes severe pain and weakness. Victims suffering advanced ergotism probably couldn't dance for days. Also, if hundreds of people accidentally consumed psychedelic rye bread, somebody definitely would have tried to fistfight a horse. Human beings are too stupid for that not to happen, and yet history records 0 horseboxing incidents. Eventually, Strasbourg authorities realized their non-stop dance festival strategy was catastrophically failing, so they changed tactics completely. Music was banned, public dancing was banned, the stages were dismantled, and many victims were transported to a shrine dedicated to Saint Vitus. Now, Saint Vitus was associated with neurological disorders and uncontrollable movement. People genuinely believed he could curse sinners with endless dancing, which sounds absurd today. But to medieval Europeans, this was completely believable. These people lived in a world where demons, miracles, curses, and divine punishment were considered everyday reality. So the victims were taken to a shrine in Severn. Priests performed rituals over them. Holy water was used. Masses were held. Some dancers wore red shoes marked with crosses. Consecrated oils were rubbed onto them. Prayers echoed through the chapel. And gradually, the outbreak faded away. Not because anyone scientifically understood what was happening, but possibly because the victims believed the curse had finally been lifted. And honestly, that might be the creepiest part of the entire story. The priests basically rebooted their brains with holy water and Latin chanting, and somehow it worked. The same belief system that may have triggered the illness may also have cured it. Modern historians think the rituals worked because they aligned perfectly with the victim's worldview. If the dancers believed Saint Vitus cursed them, then forgiveness from Saint Vitus could psychologically free them. The brain can create symptoms, and sometimes it can remove them too. By September 1518, the outbreak had mostly faded. No clear explanation, no medical breakthrough, just silence after weeks of chaos. And over 5 centuries later, historians still argue about what really happened. But one thing is undeniable: the dancing plague revealed how fragile human beings become under extreme stress. And honestly, modern humans are not immune to this kind of thing. Mass psychogenic illness still exists. Schools have experienced outbreaks where students suddenly faint or develop mysterious symptoms without physical disease. Entire workplaces have experienced waves of nausea and panic spreading between employees. One famous case in Tanganyika caused people to laugh uncontrollably for months. The human brain is unbelievably powerful, and under enough fear, groups of people can begin influencing each other in terrifying ways. The dancing plague wasn't really about dancing. It was about desperation. A society pushed so far into famine, disease, fear, and psychological exhaustion that the human mind itself began collapsing. And honestly, that's way scarier than ghosts. Because ghosts probably aren't real. Mass panic absolutely is.